Welcome to this interview. I am Gabriel Joseph Shadar. The cycle of violence and inter-communal fight in Jonglei between last December and January has been the gravest. It raised a lot of questions about government and partners' capacity to address the issues. Human rights were central to the concern raised. The Human Rights Division of the United Nations Mission in South Sudan released a report concerning the events in this period. Here we have with us Mr. Richard Bennett, the head of the Human Rights Department in UNMISS. Welcome, Mr. Bennett.
Thank you, Gabriel.
Let us know first why you did this investigation. Why did you carry out that investigation?
Well, as you've said in your introduction, the cycles of violence in Jonglei State have been very, very serious, and they culminated in some extremely serious events in late December and January 2012. Many civilians were killed, thousands were displaced from their homes were looted and destroyed, and as well as this, children and women were abducted. It was a test for the government to protect civilians. And as you know, UNMISS has a role in supporting the government with the protection of civilians. And we also have a role in monitoring, investigating, verifying, and reporting on human rights violations. So that is why we conducted our investigation under Security Council Resolution 1996.
As you are head of the Human Rights Department of the UNMISS here, how important is this report not only to the people of Jonglei, but also for the people of South Sudan?
We think it can make and will make a contribution not only to the process of peace and reconciliation in Jonglei, but also throughout South Sudan, because it's important that the facts of what happened are known to everyone, that there are steps taken to identify the perpetrators and to hold them accountable.
The report came out 5 months after the events. Why did it take this long time?
Well, it's true. It took a long time. First, there were 2 months of investigations, which we conducted, mainly the Human Rights Division, but we had support from others in the mission. We also got some support from the Office of High Commissioner of Human Rights in Geneva. We conducted more than 20 investigation missions. We went to most of the areas where the attacks took place, both where the Launua attacked Murale and also where the Murale retaliated and attacked Launua. So it took a long time to conduct very thorough investigations, interviewing victims, witnesses, government officials, even perpetrators, hospitals, just to name a few. Then there was the writing of the report, the cross-checking of all the facts, and after that we have shared the report in draft form with the Office of the President, Vice President, South Sudan Human Rights Commission. And we needed to wait also for them to give us their comments and views on the draft report before we released it.
Mr. Bennett, the head of the Human Rights Department in the United Nations Mission in South Sudan, the report you have released covers less than 3 weeks of the violent incidents in Jonglei, while the situation was gaining momentum maybe 4 months or 5 months before that time.
Well, actually, report goes back to 2009 because there have been cycles of violence even before that. But we began by looking at 2009 and especially through 2011 from February. And you'll recall there were some incidents and retaliatory attacks throughout 2011. I was not in the country then. I only came at the end of 2011. But especially we touch on the attacks in Pieri, where many civilians were killed in August. And then we focus then on this 3-week period, as you say.
According to the report, the UNMISS recorded 612 fatalities in the course of the attacks on settlements of the Murle community between 23rd December and 4th January, and 276 deaths resulting from the attacks on the Lon-Nuer and Dinka communities between 27 December and 4th February. However, at the time of the conflict, the authorities in the area claimed that about 3,000 people have been killed. Does the report take into account this huge gap between the figures?
Yeah, the figures that we've developed are verified in the sense that we have either witnessed the bodies or the remains or the grave sites, or we have had first-hand reports from family members of the deaths of their loved ones. Mm-hmm. There are undoubtedly others that have been reported which have not been verified, including, according to our report, some 294 which are not verified reports, and 370 missing. So we're reporting what we can verify. There are other claims, and that is why we strongly recommend that the government's own investigation committee, which has been established, commences its work to undertake an even more comprehensive inquiry than what we have done.
You said the government is trying also to do its own investigation, maybe at the national level and also at the state levels there. Now, how are you coordinating this?
Yeah, the government has established, the president actually has established a 5-member investigation committee, but it has not yet, to our knowledge, it has not yet begun its work. It has not actually been sworn in. So one of our strong recommendations is that the government should activate rapidly this committee, swear it in, and provide it with the necessary resources and support to do its work.
Mm. The report is quite silent about alleged failure of UNMISS in its role of protection of civilians in Jonglei. What's your answer to that?
Well, first of all, the government is primarily responsible for protection of civilians. And UNMISS is in support of the government. UNMISS patrols, UNMISS had been patrolling by air and by foot and by land for many months. And as early as 5th December, it gave the government early warning of the development of a large group of what appeared to be Lon-Nuer armed men who were gathering. And from 5th December, it also engaged with the government at the highest level to strongly urge the rapid deployment of sufficient forces of the government to protect the civilians, especially in Peeble County. As well as that, UNMISS deployed more of its own peacekeepers to the area. But there were constraints. There were constraints with not having sufficient peacekeepers to deploy, with transport, especially helicopters, and of course with the lack of accessibility at that time of the year. The roads were still not passable for traffic, and so it was very difficult to reach those areas. Nevertheless, UNMISS did deploy a significant number of its peacekeepers, 500 or 600, to the area to help the government protect civilians. But the government itself was too slow to react.
The implication here is that were UNMISS or the forces of UNMISS involved in this fighting, or maybe repulsed the attack of any elements, does it implicate that, don't you think it will implicate that UNMISS has become part of the conflict? That is the sensitivity of around Chapter 7 one day.
Of course, and that's why I said UNMISS is in support of the government under Chapter 7 and with the consent of the government. UNMISS would use force if necessary, and in this case, it did deploy in Pibor town its APCs to protect Pibor town, and together with the SPLA, Pibor town, which may have been one of the targets, the primary targets of the Launua, was not overrun. But yes, this is a very difficult thing, because what's most important in protection of civilians, in a way, are the prevention aspects. And in this case, UNMISS, together with its partners, gave as much warning to the local civilians to leave the area to make themselves safe. And many did, in fact, leave the area, and as a result, UNMISS has contributed to the saving of many, many lives in this case.
Mr. Richard Bennett, the head of the Human Rights Department in the United Nations Mission in South Sudan, as you released this report, you came out with 9 recommendations. What role is your office going to play in assisting the government in implementing these recommendations?
Well, the recommendations are constructive, and they're intended to support the government and the people of South Sudan, and especially Jonglei State, to prevent this cycle of violence recurring in the future. It really is important that this is stopped for good. And the recommendations certainly emphasize accountability for the perpetrators and instigators of the violence, because in the past there has been a climate of impunity, and it's considered that because there is no accountability, then that encourages these people to perpetrate and further instigate. It also, and very importantly, considers that there should be a comprehensive plan to address this very complex situation in Jonglei State. This report supports many of the recommendations made in the existing peace process and in the peace conference in Bor in early May, as well as the civilian disarmament and the ongoing peace process. So it's a contribution to the overall process.
There is the feeling that these recommendations might be very hard on the government itself because of the operational constraints on the government, lack of capacity, lack of appropriate human resources, funds whatsoever. Do you think that it might be not realistic?
I think that the recommendations are very realistic. I think the scale of violence and the loss of life requires very concentrated, very determined measures by the government and with the support of the international community, including UNMISS. I think, in fact, quite a number of the recommendations are already being carried out by the government. So I think the government recognizes that they are realistic, but at the same time needs to reinforce what it is already doing in order to stop this violence in Jonglei State.
One remark about the recommendations is the integration of the customary justice with justice strategy regarding human rights. Can you explain this point?
Yeah, sure. Of course, customary justice has done and will continue to play an important part in the overall justice system in South Sudan. But the scale of some and the nature, the seriousness of some of these attacks require also a very serious formal justice approach. So in this case, we consider that there need to be very serious investigations followed by legal prosecutions through the formal justice system and other measures.
That means the government, or maybe you will be assisting the government in determining which kind of actions, violations, that should be judged under the customary laws, and what should fall under the other kind of system.
It's up to the government to make those decisions, of course. But we do have views if the government wants to receive those. I think one area that we think is very important is that abductions and violence, including rape of women and children, really needs to be taken very seriously and stamped out, and the perpetrators prosecuted.
Now, do you see this as just another report that will be taken seriously by all parties following the implementation?
Well, I think this is the first public human rights report on an investigation that UNMISS has done, unmiss++ has done. So the first in the short life of the new country. So we hope that it's not just another report. We think that it is an important report. We ask the government and all the actors concerned from all communities in Jonglei State to take it seriously. We have done our utmost to make it as balanced and impartial as possible. And we really strongly urge the different communities to come together and to find a way forward where they can live in harmony and peacefully and with justice as well for all.
I know we are talking about this interview about the Jonglei thing, but can we ask if you are doing also similar reports about what's happening in the rest of the country?
Yes, we are. And we don't yet, this is a major report. It's more than 40 pages long, as you know, and it takes a lot of resources to do a report like that. But we are also reporting regularly in a smaller way. And we will be making more public reports in time to come, not only on incidents and events, but also on systematic issues. For example, we are currently looking at the issue of arbitrary detention, and we are working on that right now.
Thank you, Mr. Richard Bennett, the head of the Human Rights Division of the United Nations Mission in South Sudan, for being with us.
Thank you, Gabriel. It's a pleasure to join you today.